After the cassette tape, I could not go back to reading the files the way I had been, one at a time, once every few months, treating them like curiosities. They are not curiosities. They are evidence. I spent the last week going through the box more carefully than I ever have before. I pulled every folder out, laid them across my garage floor in rows. I grouped them by decade, then I regrouped them by location, then by what happened. The patterns are everywhere once you know what to look for. The boots, the caves, the distances that do not make sense, the reports that stop mid-sentence, like somebody told the ranger to put down his pen. But the list on the back of that cassette tape kept pulling me back. 5 locations, 25 years, all on limestone. I have files from 3 of the 5 locations: Elkins Creek, Colorado, Harlan County, Kentucky, and one I had not opened yet: Marble Fork, California, 1951. That one caught my attention, for a reason I was not expecting. It is the closest location on the list to where I live, about 8 hours by car, maybe 9 if the mountain passes are slow. I do not know why that mattered to me, but it did. Knowing that one of these places was within driving distance made the whole thing feel different. Less like history, more like something I could reach out and touch. I have not been sleeping well since I started going through the box again. I tell myself it is because I stay up too late reading. That is probably true. But there is something else, too. A feeling I get at night, when the house is quiet. Like I should be doing something. Like there is somewhere I am supposed to be. I cannot explain it better than that. I found the Marble Fork folder near the bottom of the box. It was thinner than the Elkins Creek file, just a few pages. But what was in it was different from anything else I had read. The file is not a ranger's incident report. It is a geological survey, typed on Park Service paper, but the format is different, more technical, more structured. It reads like a scientific document. In the spring of 1951, the National Park Service commissioned a geological survey of cave systems in the southern Sierra Nevada. The purpose was to map and catalog limestone formations in the Marble Fork drainage basin as part of a broader effort to assess the structural integrity of the terrain for trail development. A team of 3 was assembled: 2 geologists and 1 cartographer, all civilian contractors working under a Park Service research permit. They were given a 10-day window to survey and map cave entrances along a limestone shelf that runs for about 4 miles along the western slope. The report is written by one of the geologists. His name is redacted in the file, but his writing is precise and detailed. He clearly knew what he was doing. On day 3, the team located what the report describes as a significant cave entrance at the base of the limestone shelf, approximately 2 miles from the trailhead. The entrance measured roughly 6 feet wide and 4 feet high. The geologist notes that the airflow exiting the cave was, and I am reading his words here, remarkably strong and consistent, suggesting an extensive system with multiple connections to the surface. Remarkably strong and consistent. The mountain was breathing again. California this time. The same observation, the same words. Every single time somebody stands at the mouth of one of these caves, they say the same thing. The team entered the cave on day 4. They brought standard equipment: lamps, ropes, chalk for marking passages, notebooks, sample bags. They planned to survey the first 500 feet and return. They went further than 500 feet. The geologist's notes become more detailed once they enter the cave. He describes the passage widening after the first 100 feet, opening into a chamber roughly 40 feet across, with a ceiling high enough that their lamplight could not reach it. The walls were standard limestone, calcite deposits, flowstone, nothing unusual. They continued deeper. The passage narrowed, then opened again into a second chamber, then a third, each one connected by passages that sloped gradually downward. The airflow remained constant. The temperature dropped. At approximately 600 feet, the geologist notes something that made me stop reading. He writes that the walls of the passage began to change texture. The limestone was still there, but it was covered in a thin layer of what he describes as organic residue. A dark, slightly moist coating on the rock surface that he initially assumed was algae or bacterial film, common enough in caves with water flow. But this section of the cave was dry. There was no water, no condensation, no obvious moisture source. The residue was growing on dry limestone in a passage with strong airflow. He collected a sample. He notes in the margin that the substance had a faint smell, not unpleasant, earthy, like wet soil after rain, but deeper, sweeter. He compared it to the smell of a forest floor in autumn. That description should not have bothered me as much as it did, but I read it 3 times. Because I know that smell. I have smelled it before, and I cannot remember where. They kept going. At roughly 800 feet, the residue on the walls was thicker. The geologist describes it as fibrous in places, with thin strands extending between rock surfaces like cobwebs, but denser, more structured. He collected a second sample and noted that when he scraped it from the wall, the underlying limestone had shallow grooves where the substance had been growing, as if it were slowly dissolving the rock to feed. Dissolving the rock, feeding on limestone. A living thing growing in complete darkness in a dry cave, digesting rock. I am not a scientist, but I know enough to know that is not normal. The cartographer wanted to keep going. The geologist agreed. The third team member, the second geologist, said he wanted to go back. The report notes that he had complained of a headache since entering the second chamber, and that he seemed agitated. They decided to continue with 2 and send the third man back to the entrance to wait. He never made it back to the entrance. The report states that the 2 remaining team members continued to approximately 1,000 feet before deciding to turn back. The passage was still descending. The airflow was still strong. The organic residue on the walls was continuous and getting thicker. The geologist notes that at this depth, the smell was pronounced, unavoidable. He describes feeling lightheaded. When they returned to the entrance, the third man was gone. His equipment was on the ground near the cave mouth. His pack, his lamp still burning, his notebook open to a blank page, and his boots, unlaced and placed side by side on a flat rock near the entrance. I did not need to read that twice. They searched the area around the entrance for 2 hours. No tracks leading away from the cave. No response to calls. Nothing. The 2 remaining men hiked back to their base camp, contacted the ranger station by radio, and a search was organized for the following morning. The search lasted 6 days. They found nothing. No trace of the third man. He was declared missing on the 7th day. The case was closed after 2 weeks. But the geologist kept writing. In the final section of the report, he describes returning to the cave entrance on his own on day 6 of the search, against instructions. He says he stood at the mouth of the cave for a long time. He could feel the air coming out of it. He could smell the residue from 30 feet away. He writes that he felt a strong urge to go back inside. Not curiosity, something deeper. A pull, he calls it. Like the cave was waiting for him. He says he stood there for 20 minutes, fighting the urge to walk back in, and that it was the hardest thing he had ever done. Then he writes one more thing, and this is the line that made me close the folder and sit in silence for a long time. He writes, "I do not believe the cave took him. I believe it called him, and I believe he went willingly, because I almost did too." The last page of the file is a short internal memo, dated 3 months later. Different typewriter, different paper. The memo acknowledges receipt of the geological survey and the samples collected during the expedition. It states that the samples have been forwarded to an external laboratory for analysis. Preliminary results were inconclusive, but the organic material did not match any known species in the current botanical or mycological databases. Did not match any known species. Then the memo states that the samples have been recalled from the laboratory and destroyed. No further analysis is authorized. The geological survey is to be removed from the official record. The cave entrance is to be sealed. Samples destroyed. Report buried. Cave sealed. The same pattern as Elkins Creek, 23 years later. Someone finds something they cannot explain. Someone above them makes it disappear. But this time, there is a difference. This time, a scientist described what he saw on those walls. A living thing, growing on dry limestone, dissolving rock to feed, producing an airborne scent strong enough to make a trained geologist feel lightheaded, strong enough to make him want to walk back into the cave, even after his colleague had vanished from the entrance. And the lab could not identify it, because it is not in any database. It is not a known species. Something is growing in those caves, something alive, something that has been there long enough to dissolve limestone. And every time somebody finds it, the report gets stamped and the cave gets sealed. And nobody talks about it again. I put the folder down and looked at the map on my garage wall. I had pinned the 5 locations from the cassette tape, little red dots on a road atlas. Marble Fork is 8 hours from my house. I have been sitting with these files for almost 30 years, reading them, comparing them, telling myself that somebody should do something, that somebody should investigate, that somebody should go to these places and see if the caves are still sealed. And it just occurred to me that I am somebody. I am not a scientist. I am not a ranger. I do not have authority or credentials or permission. But I have the files. I have the locations. And I have a truck with a full tank of gas. I have never been to Marble Fork. I have never seen the Sierra Nevada. but I can feel that place pulling at me from across the map. Not like fear, not like curiosity. Something else. Something I do not have a word for. Like there is a thread running from the files in my garage to the mouth of a cave 500 miles away, and it has been getting tighter every day. He said the cave called to him. He said he almost went willingly. I understand what he meant now. I am not going to read another file tonight. I am going to pack my truck. I am driving to California in the morning. These are the buried archives.